truly wish I could be in Batavia right now rather than seeing a screen.
Looks like we got some more people trickling in here, so we'll give it another couple minutes before we start. All right, looks like we have a good amount of people with us currently. Peter, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Justina. So we're here this evening to review the Jackson Square project, which is a continuation of the DRI work that was done previously. And I think we can move to the next slide, Justina. We will introduce the core team, and then we can certainly speak to the individuals that have joined us tonight. And thank you for your participation. We see the project as really being a collaboration of the city stakeholders, the private owners of establishments that surround the Jackson Square, collaborating with Go Art, and actually the public at large to further develop this project. And you can see the number of people from the stakeholder group that have participated thus far, will be actively involved as steering committee members. But we're really looking to you, the public, to give us ideas. We've thought about some things that we think would really enhance Jackson Square, which is one of the key aspects of this project, really to increase functionality, to enhance the wayfinding, how you get to Jackson Square, and really to create a wonderful public space that allows for the performances and experience of art and culture in Batavia. So next slide, Justina. If we make a quick introduction of the core team, I'll start it off. I'm Peter Murad. I'm a principal at Architectural Resources. We're an architecture and planning firm. Our main office is in Buffalo, New York, and we also have a satellite office in New York City. I'll be the principal in charge throughout the project, and I'd like to pass it off to Justina, who's the project planner and manager on the project. Justina?
Thanks, Peter. My name's Justina Jama. As Peter said, I'm the architectural designer on the project for the Enhanced Jackson Square with Architectural Resources. And I will hand it off to James Fruchtel from TWMLA.
Hello, I'm James Fruchtel from Trowbridge Wolf Michaels. I worked on the Jackson Square project with the city of Batavia and La Bella during the DRI effort. And I really had a privilege of seeing and understanding what an amazing and unique space this is. So I'm very excited to see this moving forward. So we are working with Architectural Resources now to advance the design and really make it the exciting space that it was envisioned to be during the DRI. So.
Thanks, James. Could we have folks from the city introduce themselves as well at this time? Rachel, do you want to begin?
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate everyone spending their snowy evening with us tonight to hear about the Jackson Square and to give us feedback on moving forward to enhance the square to make it a more active, more activated space. I think it's one of the biggest hidden gems here in Batavia. I am a big fan of the BIDS concert series they do. I love to go to events in the square, so a very, very exciting city public works project, and Architectural Resources was one of, I believe, 12 or 15 firms that submitted to do the design and engineering work on this project. And they have a great team, and I really look forward to continuing to work with them. I'll pass it to Ray after myself.
Hello, everybody. Ray Twart, Public Works. I'm going to be working on the administrative portion of the project. I'm excited to see what you come up with.
Thanks.
We also have Beth Kemp and Andrew McGuire, so I'll ask you both to introduce yourselves as well.
Sure. Thank you, Rachel. Beth Kemp, the director with the Batavia Business Improvement District, and the BID is excited to see this project develop in one of our most unique spaces that we have in our downtown. So thank you. Good to see everybody on here tonight.
Hello, everyone. Andrew McGuire with the Batavia Development Corporation. Similarly, very excited for this project to progress to design and fruition. You know, I remember back in the day when it was Festival Square, and the Cars were a big supporter of it. So really excited to see the history and what we can do for the future of the space as well.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. And we're going to get started in a moment. I'd just like to add to what Rachel said and others, how excited that we are to be able to collaborate on this project with all of you. I'm a native New Yorker from Utica, New York, so a small city, living in Rochester and Buffalo over the last 30 years. So I know both ends of the Batavia catchment area, I guess you could say. And as we've been involved in this project over the last month, I've learned more about the city and really seeing more of the great fabric of the architecture in your downtown and what you've done to revitalize it already. So kudos for those of you who have been involved thus far. And this is really an extraordinary opportunity to serve as a catalyst for further development in the downtown core. We're fully committed along with yourselves. And as much as we'd like to develop the designs, we really want to hear from you to be able to make this a truly special place. And I'm sure that you, as the public citizens of Batavia, know a lot more about this area. We've heard it from the stakeholders, got some great ideas already. Ed Flynn is joining us, who was heavily involved in the DRI projects. He's shared some history and some ideas there. So we hope to engage you to hear more. So without further ado, I'll pass it to Justina to speak a little bit about what we know of the history, and we're excited to hear more from you. Justina?
Thanks, Peter. So on the agenda for this evening, I will take some time to provide some historical backdrop on the city of Batavia. Then we'll have James give an overview of the DRI before getting into some precedent studies. But as Peter said, we really want to hear from all of you today. So there will be a few opportunities throughout the presentation where we will pause for discussion, expand on project goals, and hear your reactions to where we are headed in this earlier stage of the project. So without further ado, just a little bit of background on the establishment of the city of Batavia. The city was founded in 1801 by Joseph Ellicott on the Great Bend of the Tonawanda Creek at the junction of two major Native American trails, which eventually became routes 5 and 63. And where they converged was a location of a camp called Diangawa, the Great Hearing Place. It was referred to as the island by early settlers because it was located on higher ground, in contrast to some of the swampy areas of Batavia. So Joseph Elka actually chose this spot, this former camp, for his office at the Holland Land Company, which was built in 1801. And the community at that point became known as the birthplace of Western New York, and it was incorporated into a village in 1823, and then as a city in 1915. So today, the city of Batavia is surrounded by the town of Batavia, which has a concentration of homes and new commercial development adjacent to city boundaries. However, the remainder of Genesee County is predominantly rural and one of the most productive agricultural areas in New York State. Batavia also has a very unique and advantageous location between Buffalo and Rochester, with access provided by 4 major state routes. Despite this, most Batavia residents, about 3/4 of them, choose to live and work actually within the city of Batavia. So just touching on the heritage and character of the city a little bit, the city of Batavia has a really rich architectural heritage, especially along its main street, including the Gas Holder Building, Ellicott Hall, which was the original courthouse of Batavia, made of Onondaga limestone quarried in Leroy, Seymour Place, which is considered to be Batavia's oldest commercial structure and currently in use by Go Art for art exhibits, workshops, lectures, and social events. The Newberry Building, closing in on our project area, bounds Jackson Square at its rear and represents several periods in commercial architecture as an intact example of an Italianate 2-part commercial block with early 20th century modifications. So these historic buildings play an important role in contributing to the character of the city. And now I'm going to hand it over to James to give an overview of the DRI.
Thank you, Justina. So the momentum to develop Jackson Square has really grown out of the community effort to make Jackson Square a cultural hub and event venue in the heart of Batavia. It was really one of the key parts of the DRI itself. It really is hitting all the high points as far as the DRI strategic plan. It really kind of is working to bolster the community and create those cultural amenities downtown to really expand the amount of opportunities for cultural events. And will really attract more boomers and millennials to the downtown area by creating that vibrant center. So when looking at the larger context of downtown Batavia, it's really located right in the heart, right in the center of Batavia. It's in close walking distance to a large portion of the population. The boundary of the DRI kind of matched the boundary of the Batavia Opportunity Area. And it's located right along, bus routes. You have the Ellicott Trail to the south. So there's many access points, and it's right in the historical kind of central area of the city. So very well located, very kind of hidden away, if you will, in that center core. So zooming in a little bit further, looking at the parks in the area, you have Austin Park, to the northwest, Rotary Park, Pocket Park to a little bit closer to the northwest, and City Center right across the street. As far as cultural offerings, you have Go Art and the YMCA kitty corner to it. And you can really see how it's located right in that historical block, right in that historical core. So very well located, very well tied in with the center of the city. You know, the first time I remember I visited, I really noticed all the history associated with the site. Right as you walk in there, it's really just hidden gem, like Rachel said, in the center of the city. So there's a lot of service and other things going on around it, but that's part of what makes it really unique, is it's really tucked away in that location. So looking at the history of Jackson Square and the cultural offerings that we have to date, it was developed by the Downtown Development Committee and the City of Batavia back in the 90s as a festival and event venue. And then the bid has kind of continued that with the concert series and the Jackson Square concert series that's attracting up to 500 people or spectators weekly in the summer. So there's quite a bit of draw to the space already. So what we want to do is really look at the space, see how we can enhance the space, what amenities can be provided to provide more offerings and more events in this location. So this is the concept design as it was imagined during the DRI phase. You know, we kind of pulled all the ideas and went through this initial kind of brainstorming session to begin the conversation about it. And some of the elements that came out of that design may be continued on, but I think this is kind of the jumping off point to the larger design discussion. Now that funding has been procured, the city and design team are working together to really advance the project into construction documents and really make this project a reality now. So it's the really exciting part of it. You know, some of the elements that are in here, such as the wood plank scored concrete, brick banding, some flexible furnishings in here, and the stage, which can serve as, you know, gathering area during the day, kind of this stage at night. So there's a lot of elements in here that were imagined, but I think once we really dive into the design, we'll see what it can be and, you know, what will fit within the project budget as well. So.
Thanks, James. I'd just like to interject before Justina talks about the goals more specifically, and this may be in that part, but as James said, you know, we're in this phase now where we're actually going to implement some of the ideas, as he said, that came out of the DRI with some additional design thinking. So that's why it's so important to hear your ideas. And about $650,000 has been committed to this project. So it's in place. And that's about the scale of work that we can do. So some of you that are familiar with construction and how far those dollars can be stretched, that's about what we can do. And as a design team and in working with the city, what we've talked about is, you can see how we've looked at the project thus far, is understanding the broader area of downtown and the region, is that we are looking at a kind of mini master plan so that we understand how things might be developed as they grow beyond the specific project area, in the event that this catalyst that we're developing now will lead to more funding, and we'll know how it is that we can utilize that to create an even better project in the future. So Justina?
Thanks, Peter. So next we're going to go over our current project goals as discussed with the city that we hope to expand on and become more specific about with your input. So the first is to increase the functionality of the square for current and future uses. We would also like to enhance signage and wayfinding to draw people into the space. And we want to also create an engaging public space that promotes arts and culture. So this is the current project area showing the nationally registered historic sites and local historic designated buildings immediately adjacent, including the Newberry building, which is partially occupied by Eli Fish Brewing, the Marshall News building, where we have Val Jewelers, and the Old Daily News building, as well as Batavia Times on the corner. And this is a formulated list of questions that we put together to kind of prompt the discussion for today about what Jackson Square can become in the future. So to get us started, what has your experience been as a user of Jackson Square, and what characteristics make it work well as a public space now, and what are some of its shortcomings?
So this is where we open it up to you, everybody who's on the call. If someone would like to get started, it would be great, but it's really open to each and every one of you to kind of respond to these questions. So we'd like to hear from you.
Good evening, Marty McDonald, one of the representatives of property across the street on Center Street. My first question is, wasn't the DRI, didn't it have a $750,000 commitment? Is that correct?
I could feel that, or Rachel, you or Ray could, but that is probably correct. The construction dollars are what I referred to. There are soft costs beyond that, which covers the architectural and planning and landscaping and electrical work that needs to be done here as well. So it's what we refer to as the soft costs. So about $650,000 in construction cost and around $100,000 for all of the other work that needs to be done, surveying work, any special inspections of any structure. So those are the additional costs beyond the 650. I think that's how you get to the 750 mark. And Rachel or Ray, if you want to add to that, please do.
That's exactly what it is. You're looking at you've got design phase, you have construction administrative phase where it has to go out to bid. Is a lot of time involved in it, and that's a chunk of that money is applied towards that.
Gotcha. My next question is, who is responsible for the maintenance of that area after the work gets done? Does that fall under the city, Ray?
Most likely. It depends on what we're looking at back there, but yes, it's city property.
Okay.
I would add to that, Ray. Yes, the work that we're focused on is the city-owned property, but adjacent to that is private property, and we've already been in discussions with Eli Fish for some plans that they have to enhance their back area, and of course, that would be maintained by them.
I'm just, I'm kind of thinking ahead, and I'm sorry I missed the initial meeting. I was actually out of town, but I am cognizant of what's taking place there. And I want to just make sure, and maybe this is directed towards Rachel, ongoing with the constraints that the city is under right now. Should there be something in place ahead of time to make sure that that maintenance is really kept up to where it's supposed to be?
Marty, you hit the nail on the head. The lower the maintenance, the happier the city. So the project would be something that we would overall like to see have low to no maintenance to maintain. And that certainly has been expressed.
I'm just wondering, like with projects, like the Lions Club takes care of things, and I wonder if some of the neighbors in that Jackson Square, if with the amount of commitment into that space, would take some responsibility for some square footage. I'm just kind of thinking ahead of time because you know, and we've seen this where money has been invested and then the resources it's been a struggle to keep up with that. And, you know, I'm just concerned about that on the outset.
That's a great point again, Marty, and something that we should be thinking about as we're developing it. As you know, we've been involved in other projects like this in the community, as you're saying, whether it be a volunteer group that might be take a little bit more of a lead role in working on some of we plan to have seasonal vegetation with flowers, you know, at different points throughout the spring, summer, and the fall. So who's maintaining that is a good point, especially when it's in the public realm. So very good thought and something that we can be considering as we're moving forward. As Rachel said, the kind of treatment that we're using hopefully will require limited maintenance. Everything requires a little bit of maintenance, but we'll try to use materials and, you know, quality of construction that will try to minimize that as best as possible. We're also talking about trying to limit the amount of traffic through the square. That was one point that Rachel and Ray brought up as they were talking to us about the project area. And it seems as though the property owners who do use that quite regularly as a way to get things in and out of their establishments are on board with that, knowing that if we can limit the amount of larger size vehicles into the Jackson Square space, there'll be less maintenance that's required in the paved areas.
That was my next question, and maybe it's to Ray again. Does it have to have the ability for fire trucks to be able to drive through there, or some emergency vehicle, Ray?
Absolutely. There are
Yes.
utilities back there also. So, you know, those have to be able to be serviced. I think you do want fire apparatus back there, God forbid. So it's going to be an area where I think you'd be looking to try to discourage any other large vehicles other than what are truly necessary to be back there for a period of time.
And how do you accomplish that, Ray?
That's what Peter and his crew's here for.
Right. So we're Marty, we're looking at the required width dimensions to be able to pass through. We're not going to change the area of the alley. The alley is the alley, you know, in terms of its width, but we'll look to accommodate emergency vehicles to the degree that we can. Certainly you want to have an ambulance be able to get into that space as you have a large number of people, and you know the size of fire apparatus to get in there as possible as well. So what we will be doing is looking at the location of the stage. What we're looking at right now is the stage is actually going to be in a very similar location as it is currently. The size of that hasn't been determined, and as we're looking at circulation, that'll start to inform the size of the stage.
One last question, and I promise I'll shut up.
Well, very good points, Marty.
The apartments that are back there, do they park their car back in there? And would we expect that wouldn't happen ongoing after this? How is that approached?
Well, I can say my understanding is that there are parking permits for those apartments in city lots outside of the square. I would need to look back on the terms of the Cars Warehouse rehabilitation to see if there was any other agreements in that regard. However, I know the tenants have paid parking. They pay the city to park outside of the Save a Lot area. And that's one of the paid parking, overnight parking areas the city maintains.
But they do park back there sometime. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Oh, Ray, do you know that?
There are vehicles back there from time to time. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if they're there overnight or if they're just coming in at a convenience to unload groceries or whatever have you. But when we did walk through the square with AR, yeah, there were a number of vehicles that were parked back there during the day.
Great. That's it. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you all.
Sure.
Hello, my name's Steven. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Stephen.
Okay, this is my first Zoom experience, so bear with me for a second, getting used to it. So just want to introduce myself real quick. My name is Steven Kowalczyk. I'm actually one of the heads of the Rainbow Music and Arts Festival. If you're not familiar with that, it is one of the largest events that takes place in Jackson Square each year. It's the longest running event that's been going on back there as well. A little bit about myself. I work in the music business. I do staging, lighting, sound, stage design for a living. This is right in my alley. I've also been playing shows and working shows in Jackson Square for close to 20 years now. I'm probably the most experienced with the space itself. Also, I have had a relative that lived in that apartment complex back there, so I'm a little bit familiar with what's going on there, so I can answer some of the questions to that. I'm also a firefighter with the town of Batavia, if that matters. So I can answer some of the questions that the fire department might have. I'm not for the city, but maybe kind of give you an idea what they are probably going to be looking for. So I'm kind of surprised this is my first experience talking to anybody about this project, being that the Ramble's been a big part of Jackson Square for many, many years now. So kind of want to get involved and share some of my expertise, and I kind of want to see this project through. And I was really excited to see when the money came through that we could do something great back there. So I'm hoping I can kind of lead the way a little bit. So.
Well, thank you, Stephen. And we have your name. We don't have your number, but we'd like it. You can share with us your email. Justina will give her contact or my contact at the end. Yes, we would love to hear your thoughts, especially as we're getting into the stage design and the canopy piece. And you're going to be very helpful with giving us some information about how things really work there. Your added knowledge on the volunteer fire work that you do is also, helpful as well. So we'll certainly be reaching out to you, welcome your thoughts, whether they be functional and pragmatic with respect to sound and acoustics in that space, et cetera, and lighting, but also any ideas that you have with respect to, cultural design and thoughts that you have that could make the space even richer than we're envisioning it. Anyone else? Justina, you want to continue with some of the questions? Maybe that'll prompt some comments.
Yeah, so next question, what would you like to do at Jackson Square that you aren't able to do today? Anything come to mind for anybody?
I'll get this one started, and then I do want to let everyone know there is chat questions out there too. Thanks, Beth. And Stephen, I just want to say thank you for joining us. I'm sorry we didn't have you on one of the stakeholder groups. I think we tried to get a representative from Ramble, and Beth can correct me if I'm wrong. So I sincerely apologize. I'd love to connect with you as well for future, so we can certainly collaborate in that regard. But I'd just love to see more performances and more community groups utilizing the space. I think during COVID, we had some interesting opportunities for some of our dance studios to do socially distanced dance performances for families. And I thought that was so great. And also, I know we've had our yoga studio utilizing one of our parks. So I would love to see lunchtime yoga, other things happening back there that are more on a weekly or daily basis, other than, of course, the Ramble is amazing. Of course, the concert series, great. We do have some of the businesses rent the square for Oktoberfest and other things, but I think there's a lot more utilization of that square that could be had. So I'll mute myself and go from there.
Rachel, it's Andrew McGuire, and I agree with that. There's a lot of festivals and activities and events that could be held there. In the past, there was children's carnivals. Trunk or treat comes to mind. So I think it's underutilized to an extent, but there's a lot of opportunity for us to involve, youth activities, all the way to adult activities.
Agreed. That's very good input. In one of our stakeholder meetings, Donald had some good suggestions as well. Don, I don't know if you want to add to that at this moment.
I don't have a lot to add. I think, from the bids perspective, we just want to leverage the use of that. And, we're going to use it anyway, whether it gets updated or not. But the updating of it lets more people, if it's a nicer spot, more people are going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the long and short of it from our end of it.
And Don, you're being very modest because you had a great idea where other communities you visited, and all of us have, an event like, or a venue like this would be the front door to certain buildings, not their back door. So turning things around, knowing we have front doors on Main Street and Jackson Street, but also considering the back of these properties as secondary front doors is profound. And I'm sharing that for you. So thank you, Don.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
It's a unique space. And, again, it still goes back to we want to leverage the use of it as much as possible. And from the bids perspective, it's downtown in the middle of our bid. It engages a lot of our local businesses and property, and we want to show that off. So the more people we can get downtown to see that and show our city off and our businesses in our bid district, the better off we are.
Right. And picking up on what Andrew said, and hopefully others may give some thoughts they have, but to try to make this more of a year-round venue. I know it's largely used in the summer and, spring and fall time, but it could be a nice space in the wintertime as well. There could be some snow sculptures in there. There could be a Santa Claus or holiday event. There could be a nice tree on that stage area. So we're really trying to look at this as, a 365-day a year venue that people will come to with the various seasonal type of plantings that might be in there, and what might happen in the winter is something that we're considering with this amount of investment that's already been made, the injection of this $600,000 plus, in addition to the design work, as you mentioned, the total cost being closer to $750,000. How do we make this place really accessible during the entire year to really leverage those resources that are being invested? Justina, you want to continue?
Oh,
Sorry. Yeah.
Please, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was
Anybody
just
who
going to
wants
say, I
to-
think we should continue on with additional
Okay.
questions that you have.
The next question is just speaking more to the design elements that we think should be incorporated into Jackson Square to make it function better, or different types of amenities you would like to see. For example, public art, planters, different types of seating or lighting. Anyone have any ideas about that?
I can chime in on one thing that, I got a question first, I guess, before I get into that. The drawings that I've seen so far, are they artist rendering, or are they kind of what we're working off of this point? Where are we at with that? I seen some photos of the space so far with a stage location, like a triangle stage off to the other side of it. Like,
Yeah.
Where are we at with that first? And then I can chime in with some of the ideas I have there.
Sure, I'll jump in, Stephen. What you saw is the preliminary rendering came out of the DRI that James talked about, that set up our ability to actually move forward in this next phase. And it is not the current design. So where you're seeing the stage in that preliminary rendering, let's say, or the rendering that was done as part of the past work, is no longer being considered At least
Okay.
not right now. Right now, we're thinking the stage is going to be essentially where the stage is now.
Perfect. That was
And
going to be my first argument, actually.
Right. It seems like people have said that that's working out really well. So we want to continue to investigate what the
Yeah.
best option is, as well as the circulation that we talked about for emergency vehicles
Mhm.
and where people are going to be congregating. The thought about what the nature of the design is going to be, the materiality and some of the forms. Justina has started some of the sketch work for what that might be, and hopefully everyone can stay with us a little bit beyond 7 o'clock. I know we said it was going to be an hour, but we'd like a little bit more time if that's possible, and show you our initial thinking of where things are now. So,
okay. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, like, over the 20 years that I've been working concerts back there, where the location where the stage now is by far the best. It's been in a few different places before, and I think the city already spent the money to put the power for the stage and the band's already there. So that's something that probably doesn't even need to be really updated too much, other than a couple small things. But ideally, location wise was the biggest concern of some of the people on my end that were asking when they saw the preliminary drawings.
right.
One of the other things I want to mention, handicap access to the stage. Over the years, we've had a couple. I think the one year, I've drawn a blank on her name. The lady from the Ghost Riders had a broken leg, and we had to carry her on the stage because. So I'd like to see some sort of like a ramp to get to the stage. Also, I saw something about a 2-tier, being able to walk on the roof of the stage. Is that not something where, was the artist rendering too, or is that something that we're kind of looking into? I was a little concerned about that when I saw that.
Yeah, we haven't envisioned being on the pavilion roof, I guess, at this point. So I'd be curious to see what that thought was. I didn't pick up on that. If it was something, James, maybe you want to offer something on
No.
that. But I can say that
Yeah,
accessibility
didn't.
is key. And even in our initial sketches, if you will be able to be with us a little later on in the presentation, you'll see some of the initial thinking. But of course, we want to have this be accessible to ambulatory and non-ambulatory people alike. James?
Yeah, so no, we didn't offer anything as far as access to the top of the stage, but the location the stage was shown in the previous rendering was, I guess, a temporary location when the DRI was going on, is why it was placed there. But yeah, as we've heard from various people, where it's located right now, as Peter said, it seems to be ideal. And as you pointed out, the electrical is right behind it. That was located there, so it really does seem like the ideal location for many reasons. But not quite sure where renderings were that people actually had access to the top of the structure, but yeah, that's not something we're really exploring at this point. And,
okay.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Leslie, and just wanted to comment on the previous question about other places or other means of using the space. And I think just kind of going back to what Rachel had said earlier about having multiple uses, but also having facilities where you can just hang out and relax back there without it being an event or some sort of organized event or activity. But that way it becomes this addition to the public parks that we already have. So having some sort of seating, tables, gathering spaces that, have some, I guess, some permanence, but a little bit of flexibility too.
Yeah, thank you for that, Leslie. Great point, and something that we have been considering. As I said earlier, with the seasonal vegetation that would be in bloom that people could come to at various times, as you say, whether there's a performance happening there or not. It's just a wonderful space in the core of downtown that I think would want to have those kinds of amenities with some tables and chairs and maybe some canopies so that, provide some shade when it's hot and sunny out, a little different than where we are today. So yes, and in the wintertime as well, so that could be a place that people come to, and they should. It's really, truly a very nice outdoor living room for the community.
I have a question for maybe one of the architects or anybody that would be in the know. When you have a space like this and you're designing for groups, and I know we talked about the 500 people number at concerts, you know, that maybe that's on the high side. And let's say you had a group of 25 people back there doing something, or somewhere in the middle, 150 people. When you design something like this, is there ever a scalability to the space where, you know, if it's a small group, it feels more like a small space. If it's a bigger group, the space opens up and feels a little bit bigger, even though Jackson Square is, you know, static. Are there elements of design that can make that space more comfortable depending on the group size?
Well, sure, Don, I'd leave Justina open to speak to this as well. But, you know, as you mentioned, with respect to the way the square works in our last conversation in the stakeholder meeting on how, you know, spaces like this oftentimes have their front doors opening up to a public square. Here, it's their back doors, which was, you know, very insightful way of thinking about how we want to treat this space and look at other precedents that are similar to that. I think your point here is a good one again, in that we do want to make sure that we can make it work in that way. So as Leslie said, and I think we talked a little bit about in one of our conversation, is the flexibility and, you know, the movability of furniture and tables, so that when, you know, there isn't a performance happening where you need room for the 500 people, you're occupying that space with other things. So we certainly will keep that in mind so that it feels like a welcoming and warm space, even when it's not populated with a great number of people.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Really great point, thinking about how the space will be used by different size groups. I think we're also looking at what the relationship of the public city property is, our project area, to some of the private adjacent areas that will be developed alongside of the square, and kind of this different nooks and places for people to kind of go to with smaller groups, you know, alongside the larger plaza. So really interesting thought there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Justina, this is Rayanne Engler, and just along those lines, I had put out a question on the chat in regard to that. Rachel, earlier you had said that Eli Fish was talking about wanting to do something or utilize the space in front of their door. How does that define the public space? How are the private and the public spaces going to be intermingled, and what do we have to work with?
Well, I'll start to answer, and then James and Peter weigh in on the intermingling. We have, I don't have a picture of the square on the board right now, but if you think about the center of the square, there is public space boundaries. Yep. So the majority of the square, the majority of the area we have to work with is public space. But many of the property owners around the square do have their own private space off the back of their buildings, including Eli Fish, Valley Jewelers. Center Street has a bit of private space themselves as well. So a full survey needs to be completed and looked at by the architects to give us the exact square footage of what we have to work with. And then to tie those together, I'll ask Peter and James to weigh in on their thoughts on how we do that, but it's a great question.
Sure. Excellent question. I'll jump in. James, Justina, and I had an excellent conversation with the architect from New York City that's designing the space for Eli Fish. So Justina, if you want to just put the cursor on that area like you did before, so everybody can kind of see that area. It's a fairly large area, and they're planning for a deck outside there that is two-tiered, one that's about at grade level, and the other one that's at the finished floor level of Eli Fish. And Matt and his designers, I think it was Michael, have been very gracious to work directly with us collaboratively. So from a design perspective, some of the ideas that we'll see that Justina initially has had with respect to materiality and some of the history and the character. We're going to work together, even though that's private. From a design perspective, we're going to try to think about it holistically. So they have been collaborative. That's private dollars, private funding. The city has nothing to do with that. They can't really do anything on private property, but that's how that's going to work. And we hope to have the same kind of relationship with others. We have shown, and this was in the DRI plan, so some of the early renderings that you may have seen, the catenary lighting, those lights that kind of crisscross across the alley. We still think that's a really nice idea. And we've heard initially that the property owners, that you would tie those lines of lighting in, are amenable to connecting to their building. So there's going to be a lot of synergy between what we're doing on the public side and what the private owners of the property are going to allow us to do on their property, working together with them to create the best possible space. So far, it's been a great relationship with the folks that we've talked to. I hope that answers your question.
Does
And you'll
anybody
be
else
seeing-
want-
Right,
Sorry,
sorry.
go ahead, Peter.
No, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, does anybody else want to respond to the last question, or if you see any questions up on the slide that you want to respond to, please feel free, or any other questions you have of your own.
I'm going to just add something very quickly, and then Justina, I'd like you to get through some of the precedent. Hopefully we're not going to go too far beyond the 7 o'clock hour, but we do have some really great initial ideas and some photographs of other places around New York and the region, and nationally and internationally, that I think will spark maybe some thinking to add to what you may like to see, or that you really like in other places. And we encourage you, if there are places you've been to that you really like what you've seen there, please send us a note, take a picture, send it our way, and we'd like to see what we can do to incorporate some of those ideas. But before I move on, what layers or which parts of history, and as you saw in Justina's initial ideas about the space or history of the space, we're looking at trying to touch on all of the history of Batavia, going from the Native American period throughout the more current periods of history over the past several hundred years. So where we can bring that in to enrich the quality of space, we see school children coming to this space, we see it being educational in some ways. So that's kind of what we're thinking about. And if you have any thoughts on that, please let us know. So maybe you can put that in the chat so that we can move along, and Justina, we can get to the next section of the presentation.
Sure, and there will be other opportunities throughout the presentation for discussion. So if anything comes to mind, there will be another chance to discuss. So now we'd like to take you through some of our precedent study and give a brief overview about the origins of space and 2 types of urban voids that compose the spatial makeup of Jackson Square as a public square, which would be pocket parks and alleyways. So public squares, they're open spaces surrounded by buildings and other structures, and they play a really important role in the context of mass and void compositions of a city. Historically, they've been used for various leisure and outdoor activities. And the first public squares formed 6,000 years ago at the crossroads of trade routes, the earliest known example being the Greek Agora, which was an open place in the city center where political, social, and economic activities took place. During the Roman Empire, the Forum served as a similar open space at the heart of the city, whereas in Islamic countries, they formed around mosques. So across all these examples, the main functioning of the square is gathering and social interaction as a display of local identity. Today, urban squares serve as a stabilizing force, especially in contemporary crowded cities. This is an example here in Buffalo. It's Larkin Square, and it really provides a backdrop of colorful furniture and architecture for an array of community gatherings and events to take place, including food trucks, live concerts, and block parties. A more recent installation, reimagining public spaces in the midst of the coronavirus in Italy, reconciles people with the outdoors and social distancing measures as a temporary reactivation of public space. So it's an example of how something really simple can be playful and impactful while responding to the needs and concerns of a community. Pocket parks, also known as mini parks, they generally occur on vacant building lots or scraps of city land that fall between the cracks of real estate interests. And they typically come about opportunistically as reclamation by community groups or private entities or foundations, reclaiming these spaces for the benefit of a local neighborhood. A little bit of the history on pocket parks. So the urban reformer Jacob Riis is credited with inventing the concept in 1897 when he served on the committee for small parks. Philadelphia is one of the first cities to begin developing pocket parks within its neighborhoods, and these involved the community in their design and construction and featured different types of structures for play and exploration with a focus on children areas. This is John F. Collins Park. It's a really good example of where materials reference the local and native landscapes of the region in Philadelphia. Thomas Hooving, a New York City Parks Commissioner, he started the micro park effort in 1966, which led to the design of Pele Park, which is an accessible park with ramps on both ends of its entrance that features vertical green space and movable furniture that can be arranged to suit the user's needs. So accessibility as being a really important defining characteristic of public space, so that people from different social, economic, and cultural backgrounds, age groups, and so on have equal access. This is a pocket park in China that responds to its surroundings by creating a gateway lobby condition that presents the surrounding historic houses and uses weathering steel to respond to its historical context and creates a subtle intervention in the city's streetscape. Another type of urban void historically used as passageways, but since the rise of the automobile became largely forgotten or left over or used for parking. So alleys. This is a traditional hutong. So they're ancient city alleys that were lined with residences that became the backdrop of daily life and communal living. And they date back as far as 1100 BC. So they typically opened onto courtyards. Some transformed into businesses over time. And today, successful renovations taking place to preserve the historic structures while making them suitable for today by adding new complementary elements, really augment the usefulness of the original structures without diminishing their character. An example here in our country, Alfred's Alley dates back to the 1700s, and it's the oldest residential street in the country. And it is an example of how alleys were integral to the connectivity in a city. So many cities across the country are activating alleys into human scale places for temporary special events, as well as long-term functional and aesthetic improvements, and are providing another means to reflect the collective values of a community and an establishment of local identity. So some of the projects that you see pictured here include green alleys in Chicago and Detroit, and they use sustainable materials and pervious pavers for effective drainage to create inviting public spaces for people to interact. Dairy Block up in this corner, this is Denver's first activated alley that was repaved and decorated with murals and given a common consumption liquor license so that users can carry their beverages from bars and restaurants to several patios that open up onto the alley space. This is 5 Points at the convergence of 5 different alleys in Cincinnati that uses mostly found materials from around the neighborhood and marked gateway signage murals at each alley entranceway. And it really serves as a permanent living and entertaining room for the community that celebrates the neighborhood's diversity And they also built movable kiosks and movable stage for the neighborhood musicians and local food vendors. Linden Street, it's a one-way street in the geographic heart of downtown Geneva, New York, that transforms into an energized public environment for people to enjoy a variety of businesses and the historic character of the street. We see a similar condition taking place now in New York City Open Streets Plan, which is an initiative that shuts down streets to turn them into park-like environments. So these are both precedents of not needing the vehicular access at all times, and the spaces can serve both purposes. Ithaca Commons is actually a project by TWMLA and Sasaki. It's another historical alleyway that has been converted to pedestrian and performance space, and it's considered Ithaca's commercial and cultural core and one of the few remaining pedestrian malls in the country, and uses four-season plantings to define the corridor and reflect the ecologies of the Finger Lakes region. Shorts Plaza, this is a transformed urban plaza that's turned into a community space. So the new design reestablished Shorts Plaza as a publicly accessible space, inviting to the community as an important gateway to Cornell. So day-to-day public use of the plaza now reflects the vitality of the arts offerings within the Shorts Center for the Performing Arts, which is a regionally important cultural facility. Lastly, this is the Distillery District in Toronto, and it's bounded by Victorian industrial buildings that have been pronounced a National Historic Site. Since opening in 2003, today it's widely regarded as Canada's premier arts, culture, and entertainment destination. So these are some of the different ideas we've gathered up to this point about what we can affect within the space of Jackson Square, such as weather protection, so some sort of canopy element or covering for the stage, year-round use, so activating the space at all times of the year, and accessibility. So we think it's really important that the square accommodates all users. And just an overview of the schedule and budget. So we are engaging you for the first time as part of the schematic design phase of the project, with a second meeting to be scheduled once we've entered the design development and implement some of your ideas that we hear from you tonight, with construction to take place before the summer of 2022. And at this point, we'd like to engage you again to hear your comments, reactions, questions about what we've presented up to this point. So I will be actually entering another platform called Whiteboard to allow us to see your input in real time. So that will just take me a second to get set up.
As Justine is doing that, any initial thoughts from anyone about any of the precedents that we showed? Materiality, lighting, open to really any thoughts that you have with respect to the spaces or any other spaces that you've seen that you think we should be taking a look at?
I'll chime in if nobody else wants
Sure.
to. One of the spaces that I've worked at a few times, Canal Side in Buffalo. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. That's one of the venues that I work at. They've done a great job over the years of utilizing that area to do more than just concerts too. That's a good thing to look into as far as what they've done over the years. When I was on tour, I did a gig in Kansas City, and I remember they had a very nice venue that was very similar to a situation where they had basically a city block that all the bars and restaurants in that area had like back entrances that led to a nice big giant alley. And there was a big giant permanent stage back there. And the nice thing about that was that you could grab, say, a beer from one of the restaurants and grab a burger from the other and commingle between the different restaurants back there. And I'd like to see something like that.
Great.
One question I had too, snow mitigation in the wintertime. I just want to make sure we may have to come up with a plan for that. I know that's city DPW territory, but I just want to make sure that, you know, if we spend this kind of money on doing all this work back there, that in the wintertime that snow plows don't destroy what we do. So maybe something may have to look into as well. And possibly maybe permanent bathrooms if that's a possibility too as well. So.
Well, with respect to canal side, pleased to say that we actually collaborated on the design of canal side, so we're very much involved in that project. And I agree with you; they do a really good job in, you know, getting all kinds of different activities happening there throughout the year. I'm not familiar with Kansas City, but certainly going to check it out and like to become more familiar. And we do have to be sensitive to any of the plowing that happens for sure, right? We're going to try to use materials that are pretty durable so that they won't be affected. We know that there's going to have to be plowing there. So we'll be conscious of that as we develop the design, and any kind of changes in elevation is going to be critical to understand as well how that's going to be maintained. And then lastly, with respect to the public restrooms, that's not part of the scope at this moment. Unfortunately, to try to do something like that would probably eat up, you know, about half the budget, quite frankly. So something that we can certainly keep in mind as we talk about a mini master plan, you know, what that might become, but I would think that that's part of a future project. And Rachel, I don't know if you want to give your thought on that, or Ray. You may be muted, Rachel or Ray.
I'll let Ray certainly talk about snow removal, as he is the expert in snow removal in the city of Batavia. Public bathrooms would certainly be a great option or opportunity. However, the staffing, cleaning, unlocking is always the most difficult. We even find that to be difficult in our parks. Unfortunately, with reduced revenues, there's some parks we don't unlock the bathrooms even on weekends because we don't pay staff overtime to be out there. So I hear you. And I think in this project scope, that's not an option, but it certainly should stay on our long-term planning goals. And then figuring out how that would work with the maybe adjacent building owners, you know, maybe being responsible for keys or things like that. I don't know. It's always hard when you get public bathrooms involved. And I see Ray unmuted himself to talk snow with us.
Well, you just got to be careful about how much structure you put out there. We have to get emergency equipment in there also. You have power source to the businesses around there. We have basically the buildings back there, their sanitary sewer services service through the back. So you've got to, as much as you want to put in there, you've got to be able to get back in there and service the greater good. That comes down to the snow plowing also. That is done with an articulated loader. It's a very tight area. We don't have a lot of room to maneuver. It's essentially a couple swipes in and out.
Well, we'll
Kind of
certainly.
made me think about, you know, not that Ray would pile it in a big hill, but putting a big hill of snow up there and some snow activity, but that's probably not safe and good for the city's insurance liability. So
Rachel, you have me remove it from every parking facility as fast as we can.
We did see the beginnings of an igloo going up back one of the alleys when we were visiting the site. So that was fun to see.
So we'll certainly keep that in mind, you know, as we move forward. And Justina, if at this point you want to get started with some of the engagement and getting some initial ideas as you have displayed here for the various components of the site.
Can I mention before we
Sure.
do that? One of the pictures shown earlier was some of that like perforated concrete stone for the ground where earth can grow up between it. I think that's good for drainage. I don't know how good that is for things like seating and walking you know, in the wrong type of shoes, but that seems to be a neat idea, I thought, for drainage purposes. For one, I don't even know what the situation is back there right now with the paving and how drainage works.
Yeah, so the image that we were looking at earlier was from one of the green alley spaces in Detroit and Chicago is where that's happening. And that's where you saw kind of those pavers with the perforations for the drainage to occur. I'm able to zoom in on any of these images if you guys want, if anyone wants to speak to something specific within them, and I'll be posting little notes as you guys provide your input so that you can see it populate in real time.
Yes, Justina, and I can speak to the pervious pavement materials too, because we've worked on several projects where, you know, we've used either porous asphalt or pervious bricks. I mean, there's even bricks that have slots in them to allow for drainage. But, you know, I think right now what we're looking at is something that's more along the lines of a rain garden or something like that, that can be a feature within the square itself. But we're definitely considering the environment and, you know, capturing some of that rain runoff because there is so much impervious area back there. I don't believe we're required to do any of that according to permitting because the space is less than an acre. When you go over that, you're required to actually incorporate those in your project. But I think as far as the best practice, we're trying to examine it and see what's possible.
I'll just, please.
Sorry, I was going to check. One of the issues that the bands have when we have anytime there's like a major storm during the event, we had like a ramble one year where it stormed the entire morning. We do have some water issues with the stage and possibly, you know, people getting hurt if they're near the power or expensive gear getting ruined. So water and rain is definitely a big concern as far as stage design. I'd like to see some sort of like gutter or something different that we can do to kind of protect that. So that's one of the big things I wanted to speak on when we talk about stage design.
Mm-hmm. As we're waiting for some other thoughts or questions, as I see across these precedents that Justina has shown, a lot of nice vegetation creates a warmth in the space. The catenary lighting seems to be a common theme in a lot of these projects, whether they be crisscrossing across an alley or creating some design pattern, as we saw in the Distillery District in Toronto. What I want to just get some thoughts on, and probably going to be difficult to afford in this project, given the number of things that we want to do with the treatment and the vegetation and the seeding.
Looks like we may have lost Peter for a moment.
I think that we should also incorporate some more formal types of entrances because we have those two alleyways, and it's, if you don't know that Jackson Square is back there and that it's welcome to wander through, then you might just walk past it. So just making sure that we have those formal entrances.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah, that's one thing that I did not mention, Leslie. Thank you for mentioning that. But during the initial DRI project, you know, we talked about these kind of gateway experiences similar to the Distillery District and, you know, the one we saw in Toronto, but something that really kind of makes you wonder what's down there and kind of announces the entrance in from the streets is really kind of a key element, I think, in this space, because otherwise, yeah, you could easily just pass by it and not even know it's there.
Right. Now we've talked about flexible seating too, but also the lighting in that space is going to determine what type of vegetation can grow there. So I'm curious about any types of large movable planters, and large and movable seem to be at odds, but even with a forklift or something that can move a large planter around, and that can create space, frame different spaces for different types of the year, for that small everyday use versus for events and things of that nature.
Yeah, they did a similar thing on Ithaca Commons where they have some of those planters that are movable in that way. The one thing with planters that you have to keep in mind is that they have to be watered, and they do have automated watering systems for them as well. So, but thinking about that, and I think this idea of flexible spaces and flexible furnishings, I mean, even benches that can be moved and can essentially divide the space at times and then be reshifted to kind of open it up more during performances and kind of provide side seating. So I think that's something that I don't know how far we're going to delve into it. Justina may be able to speak to it a little bit, but we've already started to have conversations and thoughts actually about flexible seating and all these sorts of things. So it's there. I think it's one of the key elements in the project.
One question I think we haven't really posed directly yet is, are there any public spaces that you personally are fond of that maybe weren't part of the precedent study that you'd like to share? Anyone else want to weigh in or comment on some of the precedent imagery?
Cool.
Yeah. Or have questions about anything else that was discussed thus far?
I'll chime in on one thing here too. Is it the Toronto something market there? I can't, Christmas market, is that?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is the Distillery District in Toronto, and it looks like this image is particularly from their holiday time Christmas market. So this is the time when they activate the space with their seasonal market, but it's used for other purposes as well.
So what I really like about that is the signage. I'm sorry, Leslie, I think mentioned before. Signage has always been a huge problem for the space. I'm amazed that when I talk to people in town about events that happen there, and they always ask me, "Where's Jackson Square?" It's so many people don't know where it is that have lived there their whole lives, and it's kind of disheartening a little bit. But I'd like to see something, maybe even on Main Street, some sort of signage that could point people in that direction, especially if you're from out of town, or even for people in town, obviously, that don't know. But yeah, I really like that the Distillery District signage above there. Maybe something like that. We can look into maybe some LED signage at the entrance points. That would be great. It looks amazing to me. I love it.
I think that is when we toured the square with Justina, with Peter and James, the first thing we noticed is archway sign or something to that nature, calling it out a little bit more. And then the Main Street sign would be a wayfinding sign. And I know that the bid had, I believe it was the bid, had also put in another potential project to the DRI for grant monies for wayfinding signs throughout our downtown. Because it is difficult if you haven't been there before, you haven't navigated to that area of our city, you wouldn't realize it was there. You're absolutely right. And I'll bring up the catenary lighting. Beth told me, I believe, or maybe it was Jeff Gillard, I can't remember, that there used to be lighting in the square years ago between the buildings, on the inside of the square, like the main square portion of it. And I think that is, when it's done right, just really, really neat and attractive. And I think that's one thing that possibly could be done here, to enhance the square's visibility and ambiance.
And also, oh, go ahead.
I just had one quick question about our a note about the lighting. I also noticed there was a lot of catenary light in all those examples, or most of those examples. And, you know, obviously that's for effect and in visibility, but do they ever do anything, and this would be on me and on the architectural side, would they ever do anything with daytime lighting? In other words, how do you know, maybe not have as much sun, or is it just all sun? Do they affect the lighting during the day, I guess is my question, or is it ever an issue?
Well, one interesting thing is with the stage canopy, it provides a really great opportunity for daytime shelter, because, you know, as the space is, it's pretty open, and I mean, you can just have summer sun coming down and make it very uncomfortable during those hot days in the summer. So I think the canopy on the stage really provides an opportunity for some of that shading. In Ithaca, again, at the Commons, they've frosted some of the glass, so there's treatments you can actually do on glass or the material that's used for the shade. I think it's the concert structure, but it can cast interesting shadows on the ground too. Yeah, right there. So I think thinking about that stage area as both a daytime kind of lounge space or open space, as well as a stage, is really important, because that's going to really provide a lot of amenity in that back area. That's more of a public amenity that's not necessarily associated with the private establishments.
Very cool. Any chance we can get like a big disco ball and a laser Jackson Square that goes around the patio? That'd be cool.
We'll have to talk to the electrical engineer about that one. So
annual events, yeah.
I gotta hang up. I gotta go. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Can I speak on something to touch on that he mentioned? One thing that is an issue with where the stage actually is now is where the sun comes down in the summertime hits the musicians right in the face. Ideally, this is the best location for the stage. It's the best location for people viewing the show because they're not getting blasted in the face, but unfortunately the musicians are. So that'd be something that I kind of like the idea of some sort of canopy throughout the square. Maybe it's something we can look at, maybe to utilize the whole space. I don't know, something to look into that wise. But that is, the sun goes down obviously in the west there, so it hits the stage directly, at least the musicians playing directly in the face, usually in that time of the summer too. So just wanted to mention that.
So I know we're running over already, so I do want to update you on how we're thinking about the space as well, to get a little bit of feedback on that. Thank you for staying with us up to this point. We really value your participation in this. So starting with some of the existing conditions of the site, we'll be keeping in mind throughout the development of the design. We want to remain sensitive to, we want to remain sensitive to the adjacent historically designated buildings, keeping in mind that the existing facades and vines and so on are as much part of the material palette as what we put into the space. Also, the existing murals and how they might be framed or highlighted by vegetation or lighting, but also how an extension of these murals can be an aid for the wayfinding that we've been talking about. Also understanding the different types of circulation that takes place in the square and connecting alleyways by the tenants and property owners and deliveries especially, as well as ensuring, ample clearance for emergency vehicles. So where the current stage location now, we do have a 20-foot clearance between it and this building. However, we do, as we mentioned earlier, want to limit the vehicular access as much as possible. There also becomes this opportunity to contribute to 3 unique dining experiences within the square. So we touched on this earlier. Eli Brewery is putting in a terraced patio deck with 2 different levels of seating. We have the City Center Smokehouse roof deck, and we're thinking about potential patio area at the back of Bourbon Burger where our project area terminates down Jackson Alley.
Can I jump in and interrupt you on 1 second there?
Sure.
I just wanted to speak on behalf of some of the residents that live in the apartment building there.
Mhm.
I know, I don't think there's any of them actually in the chat. I know some of them are watching. Can you circle the apartment building for some of the people that don't know? Can you show them?
Sure, yeah.
So that entire building there is an apartment for the most part. I think there's another business in there. I'm not sure if he's still there. I just want to make people aware that that's in there. Some people that might not realize that there's multiple people that live in there in an apartment. So that's why a lot of the cars wind up back there, because they'll want to drive back there and unload and do their groceries and whatnot. There's also, I believe there's a garage door there, possibly.
Yes.
Right where you're planning on kind of looking at that patio. So that might be something to consider. Anything that you do in that space is probably going to interfere with the residents that live in that apartment complex. So just wanted to throw that out there.
And Stephen, that's a great point. If there were any type of tables or outdoor out there, they'd have to be movable. There'd have to be walkways to get through. So that would not be a permanent structure, permanent decking or anything of that nature.
Right.
You're absolutely right to that point. And that's still concept, right? So there's still discussion to be had, certainly with the building owner, the representatives and their tenants. We absolutely welcome the dialogue.
And I definitely love to see Bourbon and Burger get involved in the space as well. It's kind of a shame, like where their building is it's kind of very limited to what they can kind of do, but they'd be a huge asset to the area as well. And I'd like to get them involved in our event at least a little bit more. And that would be a great way to do it, by putting a patio back there.
Yeah, when we had our initial meeting with the surrounding property owners, they were really excited about this idea of collaboration that might take place between the different establishments, sharing a common license, and also, how these different position seating areas will influence the design of certain elements within the space, especially, the stage and the canopy. So I'll get into a preliminary sketch that we're exploring the layout with right now. So this is just showing where certain elements might go along with our current stage location as discussed. An area for flexible seating where we might see some gateway signage, the catenary string lighting we've been talking about, and for season plantings. So the stage, as I move to the axo here, it's in this concept, it's stepped in 18-inch increments. That's to make it kind of more conducive to lounging when performances aren't taking place. So we're really trying to explore the stage area as sort of a dual purpose space that can double as an outdoor community lounge or a public living room, if you will. So, and this is one idea of a canopy that not only tilts up towards the center city's roof deck for increased visibility to the activity taking place on the stage, but also James touched on a little bit earlier, collecting rainwater that empties into a contained four-season rain garden. So we've also thought of the stage canopy as more of a space frame with metal grating to create sort of interesting registration of shadow within the square space, and maybe to host a series of vertical plantings, and kind of referencing the history of the rail bridge on over Tonawanda Creek. Aside from plantings, to activate the space at different times of the year, we've also thought about an idea similar to rain chains you might be familiar with, that might be integrated into the structure of the stage canopy to help direct rainwater to the contained garden areas, but also to form interesting sculptural pieces within the space when they freeze over in cold weather. So the flexible seating component, they may even be stackable as a playful element within the space that's easy to move around and rearrange. And a couple different ideas for the gateway conditions would be, you know, activating these walls at the end of the alleys with public art to draw users into the space. Also, another idea would be integrating the signage directly into the pavement itself. So this is kind of an area where trucks will be pulling in. They do use this as a driveway right now for delivery trucks, and thinking of the other entrance from Jackson Street as more of a pedestrian only entryway with a kind of a folded metal gateway that would draw people into the space, and maybe even cantilevers slightly out over the sidewalk to kind of be less hidden as an alleyway. Speaking more to the layers of history and materiality that we might want to embed into this space, this is an image of the Onondaga Formation, which is the reason for the abundance of limestone in the area, and actually the material that Joseph Ellicott chose to build the Holland Land Company. So we might think about using limestone, at least in some capacity, as part of the hardscape. This image, this is a historic rail bridge that brings the tracks across the Tonawanda Creek near the mill dam pictured below, as a reference for these sort of metal gateway pieces, or even the canopy for the earlier idea. Also, the newer bridge on Ellicott Trail uses kind of a warmer wood material. So thinking about that for, you know, the public lounge / stage area, and the more human scale elements like the seating or anything that a user would make direct contact with. So we saw this graphic a little bit earlier referencing the Seneca footpaths, which were 1 to 2 feet wide in width. So this is just an initial exercise that we did, overlaying the form of the creek, the part of the Great Bend where Batavia was established, onto the square. So thinking of the limestone as sort of the accent paver that would follow the path of the creek. And it would serve as sort of an educational piece in reference to the Great Hearing Place that we spoke to in this earlier graphic. These are the different ideas we have for the effectors we spoke to earlier, including reference we've looked at for canopies, pavement designs, and movable seating. So with that, I'd like to open it up again and hear thoughts or reactions to our current design thinking and the references that we have up on the board.
You showed,
Go ahead.
all right, just a quick, you showed a couple of examples of the canopies over the stage. The first one, I think, does that restrict viewing from the smokehouse patio, that elevated patio?
So the idea behind this sketch is that the canopy would tilt up towards the city center roof deck, so that people sitting up off on the roof deck would have more visibility to the below activity on the stage.
Right. That would allow the sun to blind the artist still, wouldn't it? Isn't that facing west?
This is, so north is this way, it's on a 10-degree angle, and this is southwards here.
Okay. Oh, orienting my house relative to this and I'm not doing it right.
Good questions, and I apologize. I was, for some reason, I don't know if anybody else experienced, I was booted out of the Zoom meeting there temporarily, so I'm back. I don't know what happened, but glad to be back in the meeting now. And that is what we are considering with this tilted option. We would figure out the angles, but as we know, people are seated up high in that that restaurant area up there, and would want to make sure that those sight lines were such that we'd be able to see unobstructed to the stage. West is in this direction. Maybe Justina, you can point to it. So that idea of maybe the canopy helping to block some of those western rays would be something we would be thinking of as we further develop that canopy.
Hi, it's Leslie again. I enjoyed the reference that you made to the Tonawanda Creek or River. I think that we've kind of turned our back towards that resource, and to bring reference to it within the built environment is a very good idea, as well as the reference to the limestone and the history that it has in building the city. You know, so those small little touches really do reinforce Batavia's culture.
Thank you for your comment.
Hey, Justina, do you want to zoom into the stage there with the clear roof? I believe it's like the second one in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to take a closer look at that. I actually, as a stage designer, really like that design. The nice thing about the openness of the sides is that you can see that from both Eli and from Center Street. So I think that's a pretty good design. I'm not a fan of the glass roof because as a musician, it's hot enough on stage, and the last thing you want to do is put glass up there. It is a cool idea, but that's a really good design for possibly that area. Something to think about. I like that design there. And notice it's got some rigging points for speakers, and that's something that would be great too for that area in case you decided you wanted to do, if you wanted to do music back there when, there isn't like a band and you wanted to play music back there, you could do some sort of all-weather speakers back there that you could, pump some music through. I remember they mentioned they wanted to do that on Main Street at some point. I'm not sure how far that got. But that would be a cool idea. That way you can keep it up off the ground and keep people from, touching it. And but I like that idea. That's a good design right there. Something to think about.
Great. I know somebody had mentioned the idea about movable furnishings earlier. So these were some of the examples that we pulled that have movable seating and planters, some that are integrated one with the other, different heights that can be rearranged and more playful, or integrated into patterns even. So this one is kind of a more tessellated pattern that can be arranged into different spaces. So we were talking about that a little bit earlier too. These were the rain chain. So they come in different forms. Maybe not necessarily the rain chain, but just this idea of a sculptural element that can change with the seasons within the space, we thought would be interesting. Maybe I'll just speak to some of the other examples up here. So this is called Meritent. It was actually installed at Canal Side temporarily, and the roof is actually made out of reinforced aluminum framed panels with a reflective mylar foil on the outside. So it's installed on a steel frame, and what it does is it reflects the urban activity on the ground in multiple ways and kind of offers this intensified view of the surrounding context. And the exterior obviously reflects the higher parts of the city skyline. It's also been installed in New York and the sky. And this canopy design was inspired from a site of an enclosed brick courtyard, and it kind of references a former warehouse that actually burned down in the 1980s. So this is kind of a reference in the gables to that structure as a motif in the profile. Oop. Does anybody have anything else to add about anything up on the board right now? Or anything that we talked about even earlier?
Justina, can we go back to the chat and just go through those real quick? So the people that, that did offer
Sure.
comments can, we can try to address anything they
Yeah,
have,
of
or at least
course.
put it out there. Thank you. I'll go through them. What the size of the stage? Beth, do you happen to know that offhand? Because I do not.
When we were on site, we paced it out. It was about 18 by 24 feet. I
Sounds
believe.
right.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
And
Let's
then the following question, does it support a 5 to 6 piece band?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
It currently does. Yeah, even more.
We've had 12, 15 piece bands on there during the ramble. So that's an adequate size for most bands that are going to be in the space.
Mhm.
Leslie asked constraints of the site. I think we went through a lot of them. The access for people who live back there, the utilities that run through there that still need to be thought of, access for utility vehicles and fire trucks, making sure it's movable furniture, which you discussed. Any other thoughts, Leslie, on constraints?
I think one other thing that was mentioned was service access too, that we really didn't discuss. But you know, I think there were, Rachel, you mentioned there were discussions, and through the stakeholders, we've talked with some of the businesses that they would be open to the idea of trucking some of the material or some of the service items in, and not allowing, you know, full vehicle access of these large trucks every day.
That's James, that's a great point. I think the restaurant owners were very open to potentially having delivery trucks possibly come in on Center Street, but then use hand carts to get into the back door, which is an option, and it certainly would help out in terms of traffic and that into the square. Yeah, so great point, great thought.
I am curious at the moment, since we're talking about infrastructure, and how is the trash from the businesses handled? Is it placed in Jackson Square currently, or how is that handled?
I see Beth shaking her head, so
I'm like, Rach, are you gonna take that or
I
me?
can answer, but I'm gonna let you talk because you haven't spoken tonight.
So we actually have, I'm gonna say it wrong, but a small retaining wall that's across the street from Center Street Smokehouse that houses the garbage bins for the surrounding property owners in the square. So they actually transport their garbage over to those bins currently. Did I say that okay, Rach?
That is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I think, Justina, the comment about public art being more indigenous, which is interesting because, Justina, I don't know if you knew a lot about Batavia before starting this project, but the fact that you latched on to our Native American heritage and the Joseph Ellicott land office and the trails that came through, I just think that's very neat, very appropriate, and I think other people like to be reminded of that as well. So that was a nice comment. Rayanne
Definitely.
you mentioned space to be managed by surrounding property owners. What are the boundaries of the public space? We kind of reviewed that the main portion of the square is all publicly owned. It gives us enough project area to work in. We walk through the area in various days. What time should the space operate? What does that mean to everyday resident? Yep, that's a great question. I think we're here to discuss that and certainly ask that residents that have any feedback get in touch with us other ways and email, social media, give the office a call. Reaching out to Larry Barnes, our historian, Leslie, thank you for that. We'd always like to involve Larry in different projects, so great idea. And Don Brown got off because his battery was going fast on his phone. So thank you for letting me go through the chat. I wanted to make sure everyone that did post in the chat was acknowledged, and we looked at that. So Justine, I'll turn it over to you if there's anything more.
Thanks, Rachel. Unless anybody else has anything to add or has any further questions, we really appreciate you sticking it out with us. We're approaching 8, so definitely went over time, but I think it was a really productive session, and we thank you again for your time.
Thanks for holding it.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody have a great evening.
All right, thank you.
You too.
You
Thanks.
as well.
Bye.
Thanks,
all.
Justina. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you guys so much. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye, James. Thank you. Good night.
How do you get out?
Leave.
Leave down at the
Hey,
bottom.
Justina, are you
Yeah.
still there? Can I
I'm still
leave?
here.
Can I leave you my contact since
Absolutely, please. Yes.
we
Steven,
lost
Can
what's
I
the
chime in
thing?
really quick?
Yes, do your thing.
Okay,
Peter's
no,
back
I
as
want to
well.
apologize that you were not, I had the Batavia Ramble at Gmail is the contact that we were using.
Okay,
send
you
out-
know, it probably didn't get checked because we didn't have the ramble this year.
Okay,
Oh,
and I
my-
think the cell
that's
phone
probably
that
what
I have
happened.
is for Paul, so he would have
Yeah.
gotten a text from me. Okay, so I apologize that you weren't on
Yeah.
that contact list.
Paul had planned to chime in tonight, but I guess he didn't make it. So,
Okay.
but yeah, if you have any questions, I'm easily, you've got my number. You can reach me.
Yeah,
anytime,
no,
so.
thank you so much for being on tonight. You have so much insight and I love it.
Thank you. I appreciate being part of this project. As soon as I saw it came through, I was really excited. And then I got a little worried when no one was trying to get a hold of any of us. I'm like, it's like hoping that we could have some say at least of what happens back there. So
Absolutely, yeah,
I think we could, work together and make a really good project out of this. So
for sure. Thank you guys. I'm gonna hop off. Everyone have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
yep, take
You
care.
too. Hey, Peter, we just wrapped up. Are you
Great.
still, you just got back in? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I got kicked out twice. So hopefully others didn't experience the same thing, but glad to see you were able to stay on the entire time.
Yeah, we really appreciate everyone sticking it out to almost 8 o'clock now. So
Yeah, I was sorry to take over the meeting so much. I had a lot I wanted to put in there, but I didn't want to take everybody's time up. So,
Right.
Hey, while I got you on here, is it just the 3 of us left? It looks like couple of us left.
Yeah, I think we have some stragglers, but I think it's
Okay.
just the 3 of us.
Underneath the clear roof stage there, can you zoom in on that one? I can't see it really
Sure.
well. I wanted to look at this gray and white one with the grass in there. I was just kind of curious, a little bit lower than that one. The next one below it.
This one?
The one that says the traffic signal there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to take a peek at that. I couldn't see it very well.
So this is basically a diagram of the image that we were looking at above.
Okay.
So this is the Bernie Millen Pavilion. This is Ithaca Commons.
Oh, okay. Yeah. One thing I was thinking too, we obviously were mentioning we want to try to limit traffic from going back there. We could put, I know there's removable bollards that we could do. One of the things that we do during the ramble is we'll have, especially during setup and tear down, we'll have vehicles that go back there with trailers, and it's next to impossible to pull in there and then back out. So a lot of times they will pull through. So I don't want to, I kind of want to make sure that we don't do anything that's too permanent, especially on the Jackson Street side, because that's it's tight enough as it is to get any larger vehicles back there. Typically when we do the ramble, we've been putting the porta potties right there in that one section there. And I don't be able to see any other truck be able to get in through that way other than having some sort of like removable gate or whatever you want to do
Right
there.
in here, is that where for the
Yeah.
bathrooms?
So
Okay.
yeah, right where right about there is where we were putting the porta potties. It's, you know, we'd liked it because it was in the shade. In the summertime, usually our event's usually the closest, it's usually the closest Saturday to 4th of July. So it's typically one of the hottest days of the year. So we were putting our, you know, for major events that we do back there, that's where we were typically putting porta potties because it was furthest away from the stage and it was in the shade. The limitations to that though is not everybody could see them. So we had a lot of problems with people like saying, where's the porta potties? So that's just something to think about when you have larger events in there. Is it considered some option for portable bathrooms to, you know, I know when we do the ramble, the businesses are really nice and they help us by letting us use their bathrooms, but it's pretty overwhelming to them. So we try to add a couple porta potties to help those businesses out so they're not, you know, totally overwhelming their bathroom facilities. That's just to give you an idea. If you want, I believe we have some drawings that we've submitted to the city over the years of our event to kind of give you an idea. I feel like you guys might not be familiar with our event too much. So maybe that might give you an idea of something. It is by far the biggest event that happens there. The next biggest one, I believe, is that Oktoberfest that Eli Fish does. They've done like they would put like a large like I don't want to call it a circus tent, but like a wedding tent type of thing back there. They've done that. That's a cool idea. I just want to see like whatever we do, we might, you know, if they want to do that or if an event wants to have that type of tent back there, like something we need to maybe consider is something that's not, you know, if we do large trees or planters back there or something. Maybe there's something we can come up with that could do like a temporary roof type of thing that, you know, maybe there's like a canopy that could come out on like ropes or something. I'm kind of just winging it, thinking about it, but that would be a cool thing that might be a help with shade and maybe, you know, something in the times where it's like raining really bad or something, just something to consider.
Yeah, definitely. My contact info is actually on the press release flyer. I don't know if you have that on hand, but if you want to email me any of the content that you've been speaking to for the Ramble Fest, that would be great. Please feel free.
My email address is actually my full name at gmail.com. So if you can see it, just like it's spelled there, it's no space in between it. So Stephen Kowalczyk at gmail.com, and you can reach me there. And with any questions or if you have any, you know, I'd love to help you guys design and get more involved with the project, especially the stage aspect. And one of the most challenging things back there that we've dealt with over the years is the actual sound. So I do, being that it's all concrete buildings back there, and we've, you know, our event itself will have every type of music on the planet. We go from, you know, bluegrass to heavy metal bands by the end of the night. So it could get really loud back there. So I do like the idea of putting plants back there to kind of help with the acoustic limitations maybe. And that might help some of the, you know, the people in the apartments there too, because sometimes they complain about the sound, but something we can consider is maybe if we do some artwork back there that could dampen some of the sound, maybe look into some sort of soundproofing that could be considered artwork. Just an idea off the top of my head, maybe.
Awesome. You have a ton of ideas. I'm just trying to keep up with these posts.
I've been thinking about redoing this space for 20 years. When they finally saw that we had a budget to do it, I was really excited. So Yeah, I
great.
had a bunch of other notes too. I can email them to you. We could sit here all night and I could go through them, but I could just email you some ideas and
Yeah.
throw you. You can take all the credit for it. It don't even matter. I just like I say, I'm just really excited to see this project kind of moving on.
So we're excited to have you participating. This is great.
Okay,
Thank you.
awesome. So, all right, yeah. Did you have any questions for me or anything, or do you want me to send you? Well, you want to see some of like our drawings of what we have?
Absolutely, yeah. Please
some notes.
forward those along to my email. Peter, I don't know if you want to share yours, but I'll forward that to Peter if you
Sure.
send those to me.
Sure, Justina, you can share mine as well, and you can copy both.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Okay. Do you have your email address off the top of your head? I'll type
Yeah,
it in right now.
mine is just my first initial last name. So as it's spelled in the window there, DZIAMA at arcres.com.
It's ARC, A-R-C.
I can also put it in the chat.
Oh yeah, why don't you just put it in the chat and that way
Yeah.
I can't misspell it. I'm a terrible typer.
Copy and paste.
And you can put mine in there as well, Justina.
Okay, perfect.
Sure.
Okay.
How did I do for my first Zoom?
You did great. You did better than me, Stephen. I got kicked off twice.
I was surprised. I thought my first time on here and I heard that you get kicked off at 40 minutes if you use the free version. So maybe that might be what kicked you
No.
out.
Oh,
No, we're